another show. Thank you for joining me. For those of you that are leaving or have left Victoria due to the current dictatorship, government corruption, police brutality, and the overwhelming tyranny, I wish you a safe departure and prosperous future. But in fairly recent news, we had the founder of We Are Change, Luke Rudkowski, speak with Kanye West, who is currently making headlines due to his outspoken views. For those of you that didn't watch that podcast, I highly recommend checking that out. But on to today's show here. I was requested to be interviewed by a Texas University student in regards to weather modification and other serious issues. So let's cross over to that now. Okay, so whenever you're ready.
Cool. Thank you. Got it. Okay. So I'm JP. I'm a second year PhD student at University of Texas. It's here in Austin. And so my study, I'm really trying to understand better how narratives around climate are formed and spread out and shared, and how particularly digital technologies play a role. So like I said, I found your content very interesting, and I found that you were very communicated very well, and your use of technology seemed quite fascinating too. So I thought it'd be nice to talk to you. So just kind of an introduction, Jeff, if you could kind of just lead me through your life experiences so far, and how that brought you to where you are today.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the request as well. It's always good to converse on subjects like this and share knowledge. Now, I first came into this space operating in independent media. I was making documentaries, doing interviews, and reporting on matters of public interest. During my work, I was recognized for some of my achievements, and then I was offered the opportunity to become chapter leader for We Are Change Melbourne. So I took over that role, and I commenced a weekly talk show where I would speak to people and expose corruption, and they had the opportunity to share their stories with the listeners, and in doing so, putting them in touch with various support networks that can provide them assistance. And I've also been attending protests and interviewing doctors, lawyers, politicians during the last 2 years as well. My work has been very busy. I've been inundated with requests to follow up on certain matters. I quite often get complaints in regards to certain matters. It comes through to my email, and then they request me to follow up on that. So yes, I have the opportunity to cover quite a variety of issues and topics, and it's led me to speaking with some very influential and important people.
Great. So what brought you, what pulled you towards filmmaking, documentary making in the first place?
I always found it very inspirational to watch documentaries, very powerful content, and it really takes people on a journey, and it's educational, entertaining, and also very enlightening as well. And when you can learn and be entertained, it's quite a bonus. So being able to enter into that space, I felt quite confident that I would be able to succeed in this field. And yes, I've been doing this with We Are Change for the last 5 years, and before that I was working independently. So yes, covering a lot of matters that are of immense importance.
Thank you for sharing that. So actually, I kind of wanted to go in a little bit on, so you spoke about how you like to learn new things. So how have you learned about narratives about climate? Can you walk with me through your narratives around climate, how you've learned that.
We've gone over a lot of documents and paperwork, official government reports. I urge the viewers to look up climate and geoengineering governance and the need for a human rights-based component, which allows for the use of chemical deployments, stratospheric aerosol injections, and also various weather balloons. Yes, it's a multi-pronged attack. They said it's under the guise of climate change. They want to block out the sun, but that is simply a cover. Many allege there's more nefarious circumstances taking place behind the scenes, as well as when you look at some of the particulates that are being deployed, such as they call it aluminum, barium, strontium 90, all on the periodic table. So there are chemicals which are being sprayed, leaving a trail, hence the term chemtrail. So we're seeing a lot of that as well. Have you noticed that in your area at all over there, John?
Yeah, so for certain areas, not so much in the city of Austin, but outside of it, I do see trails in the sky.
Yes.
Which actually brings me to my next question. How do you experience this chemtrails locally? Do you feel like there's some type of association towards where you are locally, or
Well, they particularly like to target low-income communities and matters and areas of interest like protests, any unofficial gatherings that haven't been approved by government. That's when they tend to deploy such chemicals. And yeah, you can see the crisscross patterns. They've even conducted expensive soil sample tests, and they've noticed the soil has been contaminated, and it's affecting agriculture and farming immensely. It's all part of Agenda 21, the New World Order, depopulation.
So do you mind speaking more about this Agenda 21? It's something that...
Absolutely. Well, you might have seen over there in the past few months, they had the Georgia Guidestones. You might be aware, and they were destroyed. That was a demolition. Now, if you had have read what was carved into those stones, it says the population must be managed and controlled at 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So basically, it was scribed into this rock. It was virtually genocide, the plans that they were carrying out. And that was all carved in stone. And they're using many different ways to try and carry this agenda out, as well as the genetically modified food organisms. We have the chemical deployments and other nefarious methods that are being used to carry this out. So if you look at the paperwork, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, very important.
Very interesting. So is any relationship with this Agenda 2030 with UN's 2030 millennium goal?
Absolutely. So the UN will be carrying all of this out. And yes, it's very alarming. It's been in the plans for a very long time. You might have even heard of it first being announced. George Herbert Walker Bush, he announced it well before 2001, well before 9/11. He said, we will get our new world order. It will happen. So it's something the globalists have been working towards for a very long time. They've been planning this out, and it's very well calculated. You might have looked at the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. He says you will own nothing and be happy. And they're trying to implement the eating of bugs and other insects as a culinary delight for people. They're trying to push that in as well. So yeah, it's quite an overwhelming thought when you really take it all in, what's actually being played out here. And one of the control components that will be utilized is the social credit score, and the technology will be used as a weapon to control people as well. The social crediting, anybody that steps outside of the guidelines of government, they'll be blacklisted from their bank accounts, they'll be denied access, their card will be declined. Basically denied access from apartments. Once everybody's locked into the mainframe, it makes it very hard to get out, and people can be locked out of social media, everything, once that's implemented. And we're seeing that now. They're starting to roll that out in a lot of the supermarkets with the self-service checkouts. It's all very much AI controlled world we see we're moving towards. So yeah, there's so much to cover, and it's very much a learning process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So back to climate. So you mentioned chemtrails. So do you mind just elaborating more on how climate plays a role in this, and what you think of climate in this?
Well, Bill Gates stepped forward and he announced there would be spraying of the Earth's atmosphere to try and block out the sun in an effort to control climate change. But that was just done under the guise of that, when in essence, what they're spraying is these poisons. Now, as we touched on, it enters into the soil, and that makes it hard for agriculture, the farming. There's a good documentary that's out called "What in the World Are They Spraying?" And it shows just how much they've devastated Hawaii with a lot of the spraying, and how they've had to transfer over to GMO products because the organic produce simply wouldn't grow. And that's because of the spraying. A lot of the farmers are really outraged about this as well. And they used this as well here in Australia, the chemical deployments during the bushfires. A few years ago, we had catastrophic bushfires here in Australia. And what we found was that the government was spraying over the top these flammable particles that were falling to the earth and accelerating the fire rapidly. So right over the top of the fire, it was like sparkler dust falling through, and then the flame was burning bright blue. And that showed it wasn't a natural fire. There was accelerants being used, and that was being dispatched from planes. And yeah, it's believed a lot of that is done automatically. It's not like there's a switch in the cockpit that the pilot hits and says chemtrails on. Nothing like that. It's the way it's all designed. It comes on automatically without the pilot's knowledge. But yeah, it's very overwhelming. And there's even apps that you can have on your mobile phone that tracks some of the spraying as well, which is important too. People have reported after chemical deployments, they've found themselves to feel like they're irritated, respiratory system, they feel like they're on edge, families snapping at each other and getting angry, they feel uncomfortable, and sometimes they don't even know where to draw a link to that. But some people believe that is because of the spraying. So yes, it's there's many movies on it. There was one, Toxic Skies, Anne Heche. She was that was a good one. She passed away recently as well. That was but yeah, there is various articles. It has been well documented and reported as well.
Yeah, I believe recently there's the dimming, right?
Yeah, there's quite a few publications and movies, so it's interesting. They like to use Hollywood as a way to get the messages through and some of the information. It's like a vehicle for that.
Interesting. Do you mind describing some of these apps you mentioned?
I can't name any offhand, but yeah, if you look up the flight paths of where some of these planes are heading, and people can report that in. There's many social media pages on Facebook people can look at where they take video and photographic evidence of the trails. Now, what I believe is important to clarify for the viewers is the difference between a contrail, which is a condensation trail, and a chemical trail. So what we have, a contrail, the condensation, the water vapor, now that dissipates in the air a lot quicker than the chemicals, where the chemicals that are being sprayed tend to linger and they'll stay there for a significant amount of time. So that is the telltale sign of how to differentiate between what is harmful and what is natural.
So, could you describe how you have been involved? You mentioned Facebook groups and other ways, apps. How do you use these digital tools?
Well, that's interesting as well. Yes, we have to use multiple platforms to broadcast a message of truth. So there is BitChute, Rumble, YouTube. Now there is immense censorship, many hurdles and obstacles one must navigate through to use the YouTube platform. Yes, a lot of community guidelines implemented and censorship tools, but yes, trying to avoid any of that and continue broadcasting is a challenge. But thankfully, We Are Change Melbourne is still available on the YouTube platform. Very careful about what is published, but yeah, everything's well researched, well documented, and a very important episode that was broadcasted here was the long-range acoustic devices, chemtrail victims speaking out, and they're explaining some of the symptoms and side effects, which were downright horrendous after they returned back from Canberra here at a huge protest. Many people were reporting migraines, headaches. They were unable to hold down water. And yeah, they felt like their organs were cooking. And a lot of people attribute that to the new radiation grid, some of the 5G technology as well that's been implemented. It was a combination of weapons used against the people. And there has been official inquiries. People have even presented doctors' records to substantiate their claims. So it's very much a serious issue, and it definitely deserves the serious attention because we need to have this investigated. So I applaud the fact that you're doing the research and looking into it, John. We need everybody doing their part to try and put a stop to this.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that, Jeff. So you mentioned censorship, and I'd like to go into that a little bit more. How is this censorship occurring? Can you give some examples of your experiences on these platforms and censorships?
Most certainly. Anything that goes against the World Health Organization's guidelines immediately will result in a strike on a YouTube channel. Even if what is being published is correct, yes, if it goes against the WEF, then the World Health Organization, anything that contradicts with those two, that's when it affects and triggers the YouTube algorithms. So then you'll come under detection, and then a series of strikes will incur. So a lot of people take breaks from uploading until their account is cleared so they can go back to rebroadcasting. But yes, it's something that we've seen all throughout the years, people speaking truth and having their channels taken down. Yes, it's very difficult. And a lot of the radio stations as well and other media platforms were given press releases to stay within those guidelines as well. Otherwise, they'll incur infringements and penalties. So, yes, it's very difficult. And over there in the States, you have your First Amendment rights. And I feel what's happening here in Australia is a violation of our rights.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. so you said some people stop uploading until their strike. Could you explain that a little bit further, please?
Yes, well, that's important information for some of the broadcasters out there. When they get a penalty, basically your first strike will say you're unable to upload for a week, but that strike will last for 3 months. So if you get another strike within that 3 months, there's two, and then you can't upload for another 2 weeks on your second strike. And if you get three within a 3-month period, your channel will be terminated. So to avoid that, a lot of people refrain from uploading for 3 months until that first initial strike disappears. So there's different tactics that one use. Other people set up multiple channels as well.
On YouTube?
Yeah. So channels 1, 2, and 3, and on other platforms as well. But predominantly, the majority of the audience is centralized on YouTube.
Right. You mentioned earlier though, some other platforms. I heard Rumble. I didn't catch the first one you said.
And a good one that I use here, BitChute, BITCHUTE. I believe the servers over there are based in the UK, but it seems to be the most successful aside from YouTube at this point. So we generate a good amount of traction over there. So yeah, that's something that is worth considering as well, even just to have a backup so all your content isn't deleted. But yes, it's been a very trying time here for the last 2 years. We have a man classed as a dictator, Dan Andrews, and he is relentless, pushing tyranny with an iron fist. And it's been a real battle. We've had 5K limits put on people. They couldn't travel 5Ks, 5 kilometers past their house. Otherwise, they'd be stopped. The police and law enforcement would be demanding paperwork. We've seen mask restrictions, track and trace measures, the scanning of QR codes. So, yes, we've really been hit from all angles here in Australia. They call this like the beta test. They put us through the ringer first to see how we would react to it, and then roll it right out throughout the world. So yeah, where I'm situated here in Melbourne, it was the most locked down city in the world.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people suffering from isolation. We had a lot of the mental health systems overburdened, people traumatized. And yes, once people are segregated and then denied the right to visit others, that's when we've seen a lot of underlying mental health issues exacerbated, as well as an increase in alcohol use, food intake, domestic violence. We've really seen it all. It's just increased tenfold here in Australia.
Interesting.
And we literally had like armored vehicles going through the streets, firing off rubber bullets at people, and it was a war zone. And you can see a lot of that on the We Are Change Melbourne YouTube channel. Check it all out, and you can see firsthand what we've been struggling through here.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that, Jeff.
Thank you for your words of compassion, because it really has been horrendous.
Yeah. So what do you believe is the linkage when, we've been talking about chemtrails, and climate change, and then, we spoke a little bit just now about lockdowns. Could you speak about these two potentially intersecting somehow, these narratives, or?
Yeah, they all intersect, and it all goes back to Agenda 21, the depopulation, and introducing the social crediting and the technological hardware that's being implemented. Yes, they've been pushing these narratives. If you look up the term lockstep, so yes, it's all very much intertwined with the pharmaceutical industries as well that stand to benefit. Big pharma, mass corruption, and it's all being controlled through a lot of these powerful groups, the secret societies. We have Freemasons. That's a big factor. You look up the Trilateral Commission, the Committee of 300, Council of 13, the Bilderberg Group. Now, all these groups are conspiring to implement these agendas that are being put forward. So they're trying to radically cull the population. And, we can see a lot of the globalists, they have got the money to solve world hunger, but they refuse to do that. Instead, they'll implement the use of pharmaceuticals. And what we've seen, the medical tyranny has been really significant. We've had a lot of lives lost due to a lot of the injections that are being pushed through, which is a very controversial subject, something that will result in terminations and strikes. Anyone that talks about the medical tyranny and what's taking place, that's one of those key areas that are supposed to avoid on that. But yeah, it all goes back to depopulation, and it all goes back to what's written up in their plans for global enslavement.
Thanks for explaining that. So I just want to go back to these platforms. So you mentioned BitChute, and can you explain how, if there's a way, like, do you keep your content somewhat aligned across platforms, or how does that work? How do you manage all your content on these platforms?
Well, when I upload a video to YouTube, afterwards I'll log on to BitChute, upload to that, and then so on and so forth, depending on how busy I am at the time. But yes, I'm always sure to utilize that. It's good reassurance and peace of mind, knowing that if anything ever happens to the main channel, I'm not going to lose 7 years of work. So that's important too, to have a backup of a lot of the content that has been made over the years. So it's good for that resource as well. And if there's a controversial topic that needs to be covered, it's good to have that as an option as well, to utilize and branch out to those areas. BitChute, Rumble, and archive.org. There's a few of them. And the more YouTube continue to enforce these Orwellian methods of censorship, then you will see other platforms emerge like that and enter into the space, because people will be looking for alternatives. And that's what we've been seeing.
Interesting. So how about the people that comment and watch your content? Do you feel there's differences between the narratives of people that watch your content on, say, BitChute versus the people that watch it on YouTube?
That's a good question. I believe over 90% of the comments are all positive and all productive and constructive as well. There is a small percentage of people that the information doesn't sit well with them, or it contradicts what they've been taught through the education system and all their years of indoctrination through the schooling that they've received. Sometimes it clashes with what they've been taught. So yeah, there is a little bit of resistance that is generated as well. But I've found over the last year, especially with some of the college students reaching out, a lot of people are very receptive to the information, curious and intrigued, and genuinely interested to learn more and trying to formulate their own opinion in a very respectful fashion, which I find is very reassuring and comforting too. So instead of somebody becoming hostile or perhaps argumentative, they're more inquisitive and open to the information to listen, which I think is important. We must keep an open mind when it comes to what's being presented.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Some people reach a certain age where they feel like they've learned everything, and then they're like, no, you can't teach me anything. And they don't want to listen to anyone younger than them or They don't want to listen to their peers. A lot of people put up that barrier, and yeah, it's hard to bridge that and try and explain information to them. A lot of that is because of people's ego as well, and other factors as well. But yeah, that's a big one too.
Yeah, great. Thanks for explaining that. So something that I'm curious about as well is kind of how because I was looking through the Facebook sites and it doesn't seem like there's many meetups in person anymore. How do you self-organize people to meet up, particularly on chemtrails or other climate change? Is that just fully online now or virtual?
Well, there's a good old saying is focus on the clear and present danger. So a lot of people have had to prioritize and focus on the clear and imminent threat, which has been the medical tyranny, the lockdowns, the dictator that we've got here. So a lot of people have formed all into one group. We have weekend protests where a lot of people march around the city, various chants. Some people have loudspeakers and conducting speeches and interviews. A lot of people live streaming. That seems to be very popular as well. But yeah, that seems to take place on weekends. We have that here and other freedom days that are organised. I do a large portion of my work from the studio here, conducting podcasts, as well as going out on some of my own tasks and yeah, following up and working with small groups as well, and yeah, networking with others. But yeah, a lot of my work I'm particularly focused on here is We Are Change Melbourne.
Great. Thank you. Then I'd like to go into a little bit more of the content and the format of content that you share on your channels. Like could you speak about the use of like visual information in your content? Like do you put any particular like emphasis on that, or just what does it mean to you, for particularly in climate and the chemtrail space?
Yes, well, as a person's video production skills increase, they can add more to a video. I like to add a lot of visual graphics as well as facts and high resolution photographs and anything that can aid the viewers' learning experience and whatever can add to the production value over the top and make it a more pleasurable viewing experience. So yes, I try and aim for that as much as possible. And yeah, all that experience and all those skills, those improve in time.
Do you feel like your visuals are more effective for your listeners or your viewers?
Well, it's interesting to gauge that. I think it all depends, but it certainly helps. It's I wouldn't say it's crucial, but I believe it gives them a little bit more satisfaction in the content.
Interesting. Thank you for explaining that. And now I kind of want to discuss some your relationship or your approach towards climate science and climate scientists.
Yes,
do you
well,
mind? I'll keep it kind of open question for you, but just kind of speaking to that.
well, that's a good question too, and it can be quite controversial. There's a good saying, 99% of scientists will agree with whoever is funding them. So serious issue we see in the scientific field is all their research and scientific studies are in fact corrupted. And we see that all throughout the pharmaceutical industry to get experimental drugs pushed through and get approval. Yes, there's financial incentives, and we see a lot of politicians with investment portfolios based around pharmaceuticals. And yes, the investment and the science is very much corrupted in that regard. So it's all been bought and paid for, and it's very much unreliable. So there's this as well. There's a lot of fear and hysteria that's being pushed through as well. Divide and conquer regimes. We have Extinction Rebellion. We have climate change protesters. I believe many, in fact, have a good heart and their intentions are honest and pure, but they've been misled by some of the propaganda, which seems to be very prevalent. The climate change propaganda that's being peddled here. So, yeah, there's a lot of conflicting statements that are being pushed through. See, we're here in Australia and it's summertime and it's been absolutely freezing. And I'm sure most people that aren't familiar with this country, they might just know it because they might think it's like a hot desert area. But here in Victoria, the heaters have been on, blankets on overnight, and this is summer. So we've only had probably 2 warm days. And yeah, so there's definitely global warming. It's non-existent. If anything, people say, in fact, it's getting colder. It's actually, some people say we're heading for the next ice age. I've even heard that. So conflicting messages and reports coming through. But yeah, a lot of people say the climate always changes. It always fluctuates here and there, but it's definitely no cause for concern or alarm where they introduce the carbon emissions schemes and all this. It's overbearing tactics that are totally unnecessary, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you mind elaborating more about, so you mentioned climate change propaganda.
Yeah.
What is this to you, and what does climate science specifically play as a role in it? Well,
you can see they fund a lot of influential speakers to push a certain narrative. We have Greta Thunberg. You might have heard her. She says, "How dare you? You have stolen her childhood." When, that is, a lot of people find that offensive too, because we have a lot of children working in coal mines and diamond mines, cobalt. They're, and what we say, that their childhood has been impacted, not hers. And so a lot of people find that a very contradictory statement that she's made. And if you look at who's funding her, and there's Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and she has basically become like a puppet for the agenda as well. So they employ people such as her to pull on the heartstrings of the public to try and get the desired reaction that they hope to achieve, and then they can implement their operation. So I don't know if you've heard of this, John, but this is something that has always stood out. You have problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, get the desired reaction, and then introduce the solution, which a lot of the time ultimately we've seen is to restrict rights and liberties, which is what they wanted to do originally, but they needed a problem to do it. And you know what they always say, you never let a good crisis go to waste. So they always look to capitalize off that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And we've seen that in what they've done here with the lockdowns, and that in effect introduced a redistribution of wealth, where we had a lot of the mum and pop sort of stores, and they'd operate their grandparents' little small stores, and they were a lot of those were shut down, and then the only retail outlets that were open were your big corporations like Kmart and places like that. So yeah, they shut down effectively small to medium businesses, and yeah, so there's a lot that's been taking place here, and a lot of people will never recover from this. The financial burden that has put them in, Yeah, a lot of families are going to be left destitute if they haven't already.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about, the impact that COVID had on people
Well,
and
it's happening
families.
worldwide, isn't it? But some places they've implemented the tyranny more than others, and unfortunately, this has been one. You're fortunate where you are, Texas, and another place as well, Florida. That is another particularly safe haven over there. People haven't received so much of the oppression in Florida. So if you look up We Are Change Orlando, he's got a lot of information over there for people. And yeah, so a lot of people are trying to look to safe ground. And we're looking at that now. I get a lot of messages from people looking at moving off grid and trying to become self-sufficient, get an RV or camper van and try and head inland, or yeah, try and set up some sort of commune, which is important. And I've had on the show here at We Are Change Melbourne a survivor of Waco, Texas, what happened with the Branch Davidians. So we're going to see more situations like that, like the Mount Carmel compound, where people get together, some religious groups, some not, and they all bring their skill sets to the table and all have their own jobs and try and live away from the mainland and some of the oppression.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So people that are looking into this, do you feel like they hold a certain narrative of the climate, seeing as they're trying to live off the environment?
Well, there's so much to comprehend with the climate change agendas, and then you have the agricultural industry. We have a lot of farmers that are upset, and then we've got the coal seam fracking, where people can set fire to their water source out of their tap. We have a lot of geographical issues that need serious consideration here, and a lot of the time the mining as well. And yeah, a serious situation we've seen with the new cars, with the Teslas. We've seen a lot of the electric vehicles, the lithium batteries with the water, and a lot of the salt water is causing them to rust and catch fire. So there's been a massive recall with that. And, that's not, it's really not plausible or feasible to have those lithium batteries like that catching fire. And once that happens, all the electricals cut out. They can't even open up their doors to get out of the car. And a lot of people have said that, there is a lot of more safer and more ethical and efficient ways than what they're using here with this lithium. But, there's a lot of different matters coming forward and a lot of different reports, but that's alarming too, the vehicle recall.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard someone else told me that recently as well. So I want to go back to the climate change, and you spoke about global warming as well. It's interesting what you said, that you felt like it's getting colder there in Victoria. Yeah, so like, how do you make sense of this? Do you search up more information? Do you resort to some climate science information? Like, walk me through how you make sense of this.
Well, I put it through a series of tests as well. I always like to look at various sources of information, and I like to look at some of the skeptics as well, and look at both sides of the argument, and try and formulate my own opinion as well. So in a non-biased way, I think that is helpful as well. So you're not just getting one side of the story. You're able to formulate a much smarter opinion based off looking at multiple forms of evidence, multiple reports, studies, tests. But I think what's most important is how you feel yourself. I mean, that's one good way to gauge how you think the climate is going. Do you feel that you have to wear a sweater when you go outside as much or as often, or do you just need a tank top or a t-shirt? I mean, a lot of people are saying, yeah, here in Australia, it's been really freezing, So, that's always the first way to go about it, is gauging from one's own senses how they feel about the situation. Yeah.
And then the sources that you use, you said you try to look at both sides. Could you describe a little bit more what these sources are?
Right. Well, I look at independent channels on YouTube, as well as other skeptical channels as well that are available. I'll try and look at what their opinion is and see if that makes sense as well. And try and look at both sides of the spectrum and see which one carries the most weight. So that's what I try and do with a lot of subjects, even with space travel as well. I look into that, and there's so many conflicting opinions on that. And yeah, it's interesting as well. You look at some of the space launches, you got two sides to that as well. And it's very interesting.
No, it is. It is. And do you use any climate scientist information?
I don't trust any of the information presented by government or any government bodies or anybody that's been commissioned to carry out studies on behalf of the government. I have zero faith or trust in government, and I have very little faith in law enforcement as well. It's just rife with corruption, particularly here as well, here in Melbourne. What we've seen, the damage that's been caused by police, it's irreparable. It'll take many years to recover, if that's even possible. What we've seen here, we've seen elderly women being assaulted and pepper sprayed, grandmothers, grandchildren crying hysterically. We've seen disabled people seriously hurt and pinned down and virtually, in no other short of terms, virtually tortured. We've seen many deaths in custody, and so many people have lost all faith in law enforcement here. So, law enforcement, government, even the court system, it's rife with corruption. And so we've really been faced with a lot of those elements. So it's very hard to have trust in the system, unfortunately, John.
No, I understand. I understand your points there. I guess what I'm trying to understand better is two things. One is, how do you distinguish, let's say, just someone that's a climate scientist that just wants to spread out their scientific findings that are non-associated with the government, as well as walk me through how this process works. Because you described to me, pretty serious matters, right? Of how you felt how you felt they were being dealt wrongly by government. But walk me through how you translate that to, let's say, government climate scientists.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I encourage everybody to do their own research as well and conduct their own studies. But yes, whenever there's a lot of money or agendas, big corporations involved, then it's always rife for abuse, bribery, and falsified figures. Sometimes what they'll even do is organise for some scientific trials or studies to be conducted. And if the results and the findings aren't in favour of what the corporation or company wants, they'll just scrap those studies and then just conduct others. And there's a lot of that. So yes, it's rife with abuse, and we've seen that all throughout history. And you cannot trust the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control. They're not to be trusted whatsoever. And some of the information that's coming through from them, like back in the day, they used to say smoking cigarettes and nicotine was good. They said that was fine. Doctors and dentists prefer to smoke Camels, and that was all, fine. So, just because it's a government agency or a government outlet doesn't mean that it's safe and it can be trusted. just like the FDA, what you have over there, that's the Food and Drug Administration, isn't it?
Yep.
Now, what they do there, there's a lot of very helpful and very powerful medicines that are listed as illegal on the FDA registry. It's like they're deliberately trying to restrict people from healing themselves. It's very nefarious, a very sinister operation here. Vitamin B17, and what they're still doing here with a lot of the various oils that are illegal as well. So yes, it's ripe for abuse and corruption, and it always stands to benefit big pharma, big pharmaceutical, Moderna, Pfizer, and it's really unfortunate. It's really sad to see.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And then, my first point there about how you distinguish government, say climate scientist affiliated and one that is not, or I guess you kind of answered that a little bit when you said wherever there's a lot of money, but I don't know if you can maybe.
Well, sometimes it can be hard to distinguish because they try and hide whoever's backing some of the studies and where they're getting their funding. See, that's there's a lot that goes on, a lot of money under the table as well, and it's open to fraud. It's a lot of that, sadly the corruption is staggering, and what we have to try and aim to be as our own doctors and facilitate our own healing with the foods that we eat, the natural products that we consume, and what we have, and be our own doctors, and when it comes down to that, and look after ourselves, and try and always aim towards natural therapies and cures as opposed to pharmaceutical or chemical medicines. So yes, it's always important to look at plants and herbs and other healing modalities. Go and speak to a naturopath, for instance, I would recommend to people, and try and avoid any of that, any of the big pharma, because what it comes down to. If someone walks through the doctor's surgery and they cure that patient, then there's no money to be made from them. There's no profit to be made in a cure. What they want to do is write out a script and have the patient come back and have repeat business and continue getting that script filled so they can keep making money off the patients. There's no money in cure. The money is in the pills. So just that right there, when you look at just how evil that is structured, I mean, it's very alarming in itself. The doctor is very reluctant to say, oh, diet and nutrition. They're always quick with that prescription pad. Here, take some warfarin for your blood pressure. Here, write out a script for this, write out a script for that. So you take that and they make money. It's big business. Yeah. And sadly, that's how they look at the patients. Whereas there could be a perfectly good medicine out there that could cure the patient, but they're not going to tell you about it because they're not going to be paid off it. That's how they get their yachts, their BMWs, their jet skis, their mansions, their homes in the Hamptons. That's how they operate that. Sadly, that's how the medical establishment is structured. And the more you investigate a lot of these different fields, you realize just how much corruption is present, even in the financial markets as well. Financial advisors, there could be a very lucrative investment, but they won't tell you about it because they're not going to get a commission on top. They'll only advise you to invest in a certain area that they're going to get paid off it. A lot of these people, John, they're out there to feather their own nests. So it's always wise to approach with caution and not just look at the mainstream educational system, do your own research as well. And very important. And I think it's key to survival in these certain times. because you know, you don't do enough research into what you're ingesting or what you're injecting, then it can even be fatal. So yes, we must be vigilant, especially with this, because you know the agenda ramps up so quickly, and it's easy to fall behind and become victim to tyranny.
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that, Jeff.
You're more than welcome, and I appreciate you reaching out. It's always good to impart different knowledge and share opinions and exchange research as well.
Yeah, thank you for your time. So I just have one last question. So this is around how you use digital technologies and tools to create a community.
Yep.
Could you describe kind of like specific ways, experiences, how you have created a community using these tools? And if you're able to link it back to this chemtrails or climate change narratives, then that's perfect.
Beautiful. Well, I created a Facebook group, We Are Change Melbourne. It's the chapter here, an offshoot from the main organisation at We Are Change. So there's chapters all around the world, and I operate the one here in Melbourne, Australia. And the Facebook group has nearly got 2,000 members, which I'm happy with. And people exchange ideas and share posts, and they share what they've researched, videos they've come across, various documents that have been published. People weigh in their thoughts and opinions, and then they formulate their conclusions based off that information. Other people, they might be in need of help, or they might have something where they need advice, so they can ask for advice. They can be connected with support networks and various other institutions and outlets that can facilitate the assistance further. But no, it's been very much a productive group, and it's always good to have that. It's always good to have communities of like-minded people, so they can get together and they don't feel alone. Because you know, some of these subjects that might be discussed, they might be looked at like fringe type movements or on the outskirts of society, because it's not the status quo when it comes to everybody's narrative and what they go along with. But so it's always good to connect with others. But I believe as time goes on, more people are looking at alternative information. They realize mainstream media is all based on propaganda. It's virtually another arm of the government. So if you look at Operation Mockingbird, they had the CIA infiltrate the media organizations, and that was done back in the 70s. And they did that for various reasons. A lot of it's all propaganda, mind control, information warfare is what they're doing. So they've done this all throughout history, how to mold the minds of the young. And what we're seeing right now, it's absolutely atrocious what they're pushing through on the young children. They're trying to corrupt their minds as well with some of the propaganda, and what they're doing in schools with a lot of the gender pronouns as well. I'm absolutely mortified about that. Children are in a very vulnerable state when they're young, and then to be bombarded with all this propaganda. They're teaching them they don't know if they're male or female, and they're just confusing all the children. So we're seeing that with one of the latest operations they're pushing through, the drag queen story time hour in schools. I find that absolutely sickening, and what they're pushing through, and their genderless bathrooms. I mean, that's a serious issue that a lot of people are having trouble with, trying to have that, you know, and just the thought of that. But that's a very controversial one, and a very heated topic that can become as well. But I find that's something that I find very disturbing as well. The agenda that's being implemented on children, I think that is horrifying.
So You mentioned so thanks for describing your Facebook groups. Are there any other ways that you kind of create this community? Or?
It's basically just on Facebook and in the comments sections virtually. But yeah, I usually always am pretty punctual. I respond when people reach out, and yeah, I try and do my part where as
Okay.
much as I can, wherever I can.
Okay, great. So
But
I know
it
that
feels like we're under constant threat, and there's so many various forms of attack. It's hard to keep up with it, and that's what the government wants is for people to, you know, really be taken back by it all, and yeah, it can come all encompassing, very overwhelming, and that's a part of it too. It's all goes into that control mechanisms, fear-based mind control as well. But yeah, playing
yeah,
off
yeah.
people's confusion and uncertainty, I think there's a big part of that as well.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that, Jeff. Just one last question, because maybe somewhat of a clarification question. So, because I had the impression Melbourne was just its own kind of organization. We mentioned chapters.
Yeah,
Could you
so if you look
explain
up
a little bit?
wearechange.org, you
Yeah.
look at you click on about, it shows up chapters. Now it'll show
Okay.
you all of the chapters in the USA from
Okay.
New York, California, right throughout. And then there's another icon, countries. And if you click on that, it comes up foreign, and then you click up Australia, and then it shows Melbourne, Canberra, Sydney, Brisbane. And if you click on Melbourne, my chapter comes up at the Facebook group. And from there, you'll be able to find me. So
Okay.
that's how that's all linked in.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. So generally, is y'all's narratives that you speak about, are they aligned across all chapters? Or?
I think most people have a general consensus. Yeah, most people, but everyone's aligned, but there's not too much interference. Everybody operates independently. There's no instructions given or no advice given from like the top down or anything like that. Everybody's operates like independent contractors doing their own research, publishing their own findings, and doing that. So, and that's all
Cool.
very, very helpful. I think, but yeah, I try and keep in contact with Justin from Florida. He's a good person. You can reach out to him. He'll be happy
Okay.
to help with anything. And yeah, he's giving talks before a lot of there's a lot of school boards and a lot of council meetings that they're opening up over there where they get the community to come in and speak for 5 minutes. So he's been taking part in that, which I think is productive.
Yeah, thank you for that referral. I'll check that out. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I really enjoyed spending this hour with you, getting to learn more about your experiences. So thank you for that.
You're more than welcome, John, and I appreciate you reaching out. I hope you got something from this and you're able to gain from it. And I've been
Yeah.
of assistance. There's some information that the viewers might find interesting and some avenues that they can follow up on. So it's all very much productive and yeah, appreciate your time as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. Take care.
Good on you, buddy.
All right.
Well, that does it for today's show. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned for more interviews.